Alright, so The Last of Us came out 10 years ago today. It's actually kind of weird to think about the fact that I remember when this game came out and the reactions to it. I'm pretty sure most people were not expecting us to get a game that was just so groundbreaking. There was a lot about this game that's been said. There's a lot about this game that I can say, but I kind of just want to take this video to appreciate and celebrate the game that we got. Because it's not too often that a game comes along and completely reshapes the way certain genres are made and kind of shapes the way people see video games in general. The Last of Us came out 10 years ago and completely reshaped the gaming sphere as we know it for single player experiences. Everything from the voice acting to the music to the visuals to the storytelling was just perfect in my opinion, and it's one of, if not the only game to pretty much be a perfect game in my opinion. Like I said, when this game came out, it was getting perfect scores from people who actually had good reputations at places like IGN and Metacritic back when these reviews actually meant something. It was actually important to get good scores back in 2011 because people actually respected these brands, and for a game like this to come out at this caliber when most people weren't expecting it was groundbreaking. I remember this game being probably one of the first big single player experiences that I really wanted to get into and follow, because at the time I was still playing games on my DS and like Minecraft and World of Warcraft, and I think that's it. So for myself and a lot of people around my age, this was one of the very first mature storytelling experiences that we were exposed to. And for me, I think it kind of shaped the way I would look at video games as a whole. I've mentioned it in a couple videos now, but I play a lot of multiplayer games and a lot of competitive games. But I also have a really huge soft spot for good single player experiences. That was most likely due to this game and just how much I actually love the story. I think you can pick any game year for this to come out in since its original release, and it would still be one of, if not the best game to come out that year. I don't count the remaster because it's just a remaster. It's not really anything new. Obviously, the PlayStation 5 remake, remaster version, whatever it is still the same game at its core, just updated visuals. So to me, there wasn't really anything new for that to be considered like a new game. Obviously, a lot of people have mixed opinions on the second game, myself included. I just think the first game is just so much better in a lot of different ways. I think the biggest way would be pacing. I think the pacing of the first game is almost perfect, while the pacing in the second game is kind of hit or miss. The connection between Joel and Ellie in the first game is something that really shaped the way single player games are made, because it kind of led the path in a relationship like a father-daughter type of way. I seriously don't think we would have gotten games like the new God of War games or God of War Ragnarok without The Last of Us laying the groundwork for an older protagonist and like a younger person being the helper protag. I think every location design in this game is also really, really good. If you kind of take a step back and look at the game just from like an outside view, you can see that pretty much the entire game is just linear, but each level design is so good that it almost doesn't feel that way. It's hard for me to look at it now and not see a linear game because I've played it so many different times, and I think most people know exactly what happens at almost every point of this game because there's so much from this game that's just iconic. But if you really went back and looked at people's reactions from 2013, you'll see just how impactful the way that Naughty Dog made the levels was. Obviously, Naughty Dog as a company has a huge reputation, and I think, yes, Uncharted's 1 through 3 were really, really good, and Uncharted is one of my favorite video game franchises of all time, but I still don't think any of them really touched The Last of Us except for maybe 4. But even then, it's still kind of up in the air, up to the person. But I seriously do think that without The Last of Us, Uncharted 4 might not have even happened in the way that it did, because there would have just been a lot of either confusion or different game design around the core game, while The Last of Us really just inspired the entire category of single player games. Like I said earlier, this game is just a masterclass in storytelling. It opens you up at the start of the game and you really connect with Joel as a character because you understand why he is the way that he is after the time jump because of that super iconic opening. And then as the game progresses, you see him go through more challenges, and it pretty much just seems like Joel is just getting beaten down at almost every single point, except for after he meets Ellie. It's kind of like a dynamic where they either get beaten down and one of them picks the other one up, or they just kind of always help each other. I'll always say that the game is at its best right after Joel gets the grave injury, and then you have the Ellie and Bill missions, and then the whole Bill like boss fight, and then after onwards is just the best part of the game, which is hard because I feel like everyone can have a different opinion on the best part of the game because this game is so good. The writing of the characters are just so real, and they feel like this situation is actually something that can be real, and I feel like that's why the TV show was as popular as it was yes, it was The Last of Us branding, but they took a lot of beats from the game, and if the game hadn't been so strong, then I don't think the TV show adaptation would be either. Obviously, I'm pretty sure they have completely different writers for the show than the game, and I prefer the game over the show, but I mean, again, that's just because the game is so good. The single player experience also came with a multiplayer experience that I think is super underrated and also really good. The crafting system in the game is really good. All of it is just, it's almost amazing how many different aspects of this game just come together and work so well. It's sad too, because now 10 years later, we're in a state of the Last of Us franchise where we don't really know where it's going. We know the TV show is really successful and there's eventually going to be more seasons. We know that the second game was super controversial and people want a third game. And we know that they're working on like another version of The Last of Us multiplayer, but we don't really know what's going on with that because the last that anyone heard, it's just kind of a mess. And it's sad because 10 years after such a monumental game came out, it just kind of feels like the franchise doesn't know where to go. Maybe that's just the vibe that I'm catching from it, but that's just how it feels. I kind of eventually want to make a video on The Last of Us Part 2, but I haven't played it since it came out, because I just did not enjoy it the same way. I don't think it's a bad game whatsoever. I actually think it's a really, really great made game, but I just don't agree with a lot of it. And it's not just the Joel thing that most people get upset about. I actually am not too upset at that. I can do a whole nother video where I like redo the story of The Last of Us Part 2 because that's how strongly I feel about it. I really wonder how many seasons they're gonna make of the show. Like I'm confused about that, but I mean, I kind of want like a prequel game. I think that would be cool. Just give me more of young Joel and young Ellie, please, because they didn't do that enough in the second game.